So on behalf of SMPS and our new board, I'm Bridget Krause, the new SMPS Wisconsin president. So this is our first program of our new season. So I'm super happy to kick it off with our program today. And can my biz development team still compete? So I'm interested to see what Brian and the group has to share. I just wanted to share a couple quick announcements. So if you are, hopefully most of you are familiar with SMPS, we have some additional programs coming up here in October. We have our Learn Togethers, which we do every month, which is kind of more informal discussions about topics that we are all tackling. So our next one is coming up on October 9th. And then our October program, which will also be held virtually, on how to use scribology to tell stories, will be coming up on the 15th. And then our virtual program is on secrets to re-energize our PR programs, and that will be held on November 5th. And then our next virtual Learn Together is on November 13th. So that kind of gets us up to our holiday parties, which we're kind of deciding right now what we're going to do for those, but hopefully those will be fun too. Just a reminder, all of our programs are virtual through the end of the year, and you can find all of that information up on our website, smpswisconsin.org. Also, this year is our 30th anniversary, so to celebrate that anniversary, we have kicked off a special promotion during the month of September. So most of you hopefully have already received an email from me kind of announcing that promotion, but for $30 for members, you can attend 4 programs this year. And for non-members or guests who are joining us, I know we have a number of different people from around the country, which is super fantastic. You're welcome to join us too. And if you're an SMPS member already, you get that special membership pricing. But if you're a guest for $60, you can also attend 4 of our programs. So that promotion runs through September 30th. So make sure to check out our website for that. And then early in October, we will be emailing out those codes that you guys can use to register for the programs. Also, we are also soliciting sponsors and reaching out to our sponsors from last year, as well as anyone new who wants to support SMPS Wisconsin this year. So Dale Kent is our sponsorship director, so hopefully he will be kicking off our sponsorship drive here shortly. And I want to thank all of you guys for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to Heather, our program chair, to introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Bridget. So before I jump in, I just want to have a brief little housekeeping kind of reminder. So we are recording today's program so that we can track kind of some of the chat and whatnot. So just be aware of that. Secondly, I would recommend that you have your chat box open. So if you have any questions during the program, you can go ahead and type it into the chat. Sarah from Revenue Group will be, hi Sarah, thanks, will be saying your questions out loud. So you can go ahead and post them for everyone to see if you'd like, and then she'll go ahead and read them when it's appropriate. Otherwise, I will at the end too be moderating and can help make sure that all questions are asked if you want to send something out directly to me or Sarah. Everybody should be muted. If you're not, please go ahead and mute yourselves. Video is not necessary as well, as long as you can just see Brian and Mike and Sarah. I think you'll be good, and Brian is sharing his screen right now. So that's kind of it for the housekeeping rules. If you do need to leave early, feel free to jump off. You're not going to hurt our feelings if you have something that you need to go to or not. Just feel free to self-moderate yourself and hop on off. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our program speakers today. Again, just for those of you jumping on, you are here for the SMPS Wisconsin virtual program called Can My Biz Development Team Compete? And the summary here is that right now we're just chasing fewer and fewer opportunities. Thank you, COVID. And the buying teams and the way buying teams buy is inherently kind of causing some commoditization. And the decline of traditional face-to-face relationships leaves kind of some room for opportunity for some new approaches and whatnot. And I know that a lot of us have kind of pivoted, that's the word for the year. But Revenue Path Group is gonna give us some more tips here. And they're gonna help us sell AEC in the 2020 environment. So we do encourage active participation during this. And in doing so, you will be in a drawing for a free service from RPG. Called their elevator pitch, and I'm sure they'll tell us more about that later. But by doing active participation, that's basically asking a question or commenting in our chat. So we are going to log everybody who chats, and then it's a one entry. It's not like the more questions you ask, the more chance you get. But we'll put everybody's name in, and then have a drawing for the free service, and we will do that afterwards. So
great.
Take it away, Brian.
All right. Thanks. Hey, thanks, Heather. Thanks, Bridget. This is the first program of the year. And how about we do this? How about we commit to making this a high watermark for the rest of the year? So let's have a great session together. Joining me today, my name is Brian Gray. I'm the CEO of the Revenue Path Group. Joining me today is Mike Rendell, one of my business partners. We've worked alongside each other for many, many years. And then Sarah West, she is our VP of Marketing that we've worked with for a long time as well, that actually was a client years and years ago from the great state of Michigan. Just to give you a couple things, I don't take myself seriously, but I take the content we're going to deliver really seriously. And I really hope that over the next few minutes that we can provide something for you to start or better lead your organization moving forward. I've always been a proponent of SMPS. I've served on our local board from a programs chair for a couple of years, and in what I see in the world specifically to AEC is that marketing has not received its due within the organization. But yet we are in the middle of this transitionary period where our lives and our businesses will never be the same. And I think that these openings create opportunities for all of us. So please think about this from a leadership perspective. Think about what's going to be required to take these simple but hard to execute concepts to your principles, because we have to change and adapt. Now, I'm super happy to be here with the great state of Wisconsin. I absolutely love Wisconsin. This morning, I wondered why it is. We vacationed there as a family and been to Milwaukee many times. And in Madison, Wisconsin is probably my favorite city in the world. And I thought of the origin. This all goes back to fall semester of 1984. My freshman year, our pledge class road trip was at the University of Wisconsin. And during that time, I was probably in the whole world the shortest love with Madonna, because the driver of the car just bought her first album, and I heard Starlight, Starbright over and over and over again for 10 hours. So besides that, I've been in love with your state ever since. So to get started here, we want to talk about what we can do to help you, each and every member in the state of Wisconsin, become much more adept at dealing with this change we're dealing with. You don't need us to share with you that a change has already happened. You don't need us to even tell you about, hey, COVID is making our world different. And it's created, but what the things I want to focus on today is not the fact that COVID is proving to be a very significant disruption in our lives. Yet in my business career, we've probably survived 3 or 4 disruptions, nothing quite like this, but every single one has fundamentally changed things. But what's common with the previous ones is it's always been followed by some degree of economic uncertainty. And as organizations, you've come off the last 10 years of business continuing to expand because the market kept growing. But when things stop and uncertainty creeps in, we now have to live in a world where there are too many firms chasing too few of opportunities. It's almost like that game Musical Chairs, right? The music is playing, but all of a sudden the music stopped, and not just one chair got pulled away. Think about 4 chairs or 5 chairs being pulled away. That's what's going to happen in this world where there are too many good firms chasing too few of opportunities. But the real thing I want to focus on why this is important for you to be here today, is that we now live in a world of accelerations where the world continues to accelerate at a pace that is stretching beyond our own brain's capability. And this is quite concerning, but it's very opportunistic for some of us. But what's interesting to me is when you think about accelerations in the world we're in right now, if you look backward in time, This will be the fastest we've ever gone, right? Things are moving faster than we've ever seen in our entire lives. But what's interesting and fascinating to me is as we turn our vision toward the future, this will be the slowest we will ever go. And we've now entered an era where not just the rate of the change is accelerating, but the speed of the rate of change is accelerating at the same time. And this is going to create quite a disruptive and never going back change. In fact, what we've experienced is pretty much fast forwarding 5 years. It's almost like we put the year 2025 and are stacking it right on top of this year. For example, right, telehealth, right? Telehealth has been around for years. We could have just easily have just phoned in via Zoom or whatever the app they're using with our doctor and complete appointments in 10 minutes versus 2.5 hours out of your day. No one did it till we had to, and now why would we ever go back, right? GoToMeeting and WebEx, they've been around for what, 15 years, Sarah? 15, long time. Didn't really use them because I'd rather be face-to-face. I'd rather do all these other things, but now we can't. And I don't know when we're going to go back to this environment of face-to-face meetings, if ever. We're not going to always be isolated, but we're not going to get the FaceTime like we used to because there's too much potential productivity and saved time, not just from your perspective, but from your prospect's perspective. So we now live in a world where change is so vast, and I would even say dislocative, but it's going to be hard to tell disaster from opportunity. And believe it or not, and I hope I'm not underselling this or overselling it, should I say, that you can turn all this into an opportunity, but we have to change certain things right now. Not in 6 months, not in next year, not when things get better, but we have to start doing things differently right now. And I know that many of us are not in a spot where we can start kicking over tables and chairs, virtual ones, saying, we're going to change this business. We need to do things differently right now. But I really want you to stretch your leadership potential and influence to start bringing these changes to your entire organization. I'm going to put this on you, and this is going to become your opportunity. Now, Mike and I and Sarah, we've been talking about the 3 deadly C's for some time. In fact, I was in an SMPS. I was up in Milwaukee about 3 or 4 years ago. And we were talking about the 3 deadly C's then because they were just as real then. They're just going to be much worse now. And those 3 deadly C's are things that we're having to live with in today's environment. All started about 15 years ago because of the internet and other things. But what we are seeing, the 3 deadly C's are commoditization, compressed selling time, and consensus decision-making. So not only are decision-making teams keep getting bigger and bigger, they're ignoring you until the very end of the buying journey. And then what they're doing is they're making all 3 or 4 finalists exactly what they need or the same, and they just drive it down and make it about price. But when you're surrendering your margins on a regular basis, you cannot stay relevant and vital moving forward. And what we believe this is causing, and it's compounding, it's causing this race to the bottom, where if everybody's perceived to be the same, why wouldn't we base this on price? And what's compounding the problem is we have too many good firms chasing too few of opportunities. That's only going to accelerate the race to the bottom, where we feel, because we need the work now before we didn't, that we want the work and need the work, that we're willing to lower our price to get the job. But I want your principals to understand that this is a very deadly spot to be in, because you've surrendered your unique value. And what we believe is that business development teams are unprepared and ill-equipped to sell through these dynamic and disruptive changes that we're experiencing. And we can't just say, let's just hunker down and take cover, because that will not get us through. In the past, it did, because we were not in the middle of an accelerating age. But if we say, let's take cover and let's hunker down and let's let a few people go if we have to, but we're going to do what we can to survive and come out on the other end, there may not be another end. And I'm not about doom and gloom, because I believe that there is a way to convert this into a significant opportunity for you today and your firm. But we have to understand what's really going on. And over the last 10 years, when the market kept growing, it was very easy to continue to grow because the market expanded. I remember back in January, people were like, I really don't care if I get the job or not because we're so busy. We didn't have time. I don't even think we even need it or want it. That's going to be way different. But your businesses kept growing just because the market grew. But what happens if, let's go the other direction. Let's say we're here and all of a sudden it shrinks and there are too many firms chasing too few opportunities. So what you have to do to grow is you've got to grow your market share because there's not enough to go around, which means you have to stand up in front of a complete stranger and convince them virtually that you are by far the best choice they could ever make. That's hard to do when in your prospect's mind, everyone looks the same, sounds the same, and acts the same. You might think you're different, and you might think you're saying things differently, but put yourself in your prospect's shoes. They're going to say, this stuff, everybody says it's their people that make the difference. Everybody says they have 50 years of experience. Everybody says all these things, and my brain gets confused. So I want to let you know that hoping this all goes away and goes back to the previous life, that's not a good strategy. And I will say this, that doing nothing is not an option. So we have choices we have to commit, don't have to. We have choices we're either going to make or not make, but doing nothing is still a choice. So said Geddy Lee. Who thought I'd be throwing a Rush quote out there today? So the reality is only the relevant organizations are going to survive. And the ones that are relevant are those that can actually uphold and maintain their margin in a world where everybody's racing to the bottom. Because following them to the bottom will not do your business any good. And what we're going to share over the next few minutes are things that you can do that will help you maintain that margin and relevancy, but we have to change. One of my favorite Warren Buffett quotes, it's only when the tide goes out do you see who's been swimming naked. When the business is great, we don't have to get that much better because the business just keeps coming to us. But what happens when it goes the other direction? So I firmly believe that while there are things that we can nip and bud and work on, the biggest challenge you face is staring you right in the eye. It's not going to take care of itself. In fact, it's going to get worse quickly. But as I shared that economist quote earlier, right, there is an opportunity between disaster and opportunity. The choice is yours. It's right in front of us, and you're not alone. Every session I do, or at least each week, I try and find another example unrelated to the industry I'm speaking to show them that this acceleration is not unique to you. It's impacting all of us. I saw this last week just in my news scroll, but this is from the general of the U.S. Air Force saying if we don't change now, we're going to suffer losses in a World War II style in our next engagement. And in this document, accelerate, change, or lose, what he was saying is good enough today will fail tomorrow. So when you go to your principal saying, we have to change right now or we will not be relevant, it's not just you. It's happening everywhere. And hope is not a strategy, and hunkering down will never, ever, ever get you through this. So if nothing else, this recording can be made available to share with every single principal in your firm because he or she needs to understand the same darn things that we want you talking about. So what we've done is we've collected things to share that what competitive teams are doing right now. Some are simple, some are hard, but nothing here is complicated. There's absolutely nothing that I will share in the next 27 minutes and 16 seconds that will be like, wow, I don't understand what he's talking about. The biggest challenge that you're going to confront is having the desire and drive to see these changes through. So as I share with you these next 6 steps, it's not, to me, it's not whether you do something about it or not. The question really is, what are you going to do when your competition does this to you? That's the real call to arms here. So, you guys ready to jump in? Mike, Sarah, you ready to run here? All right. So what competitive teams are doing, number one, they're insanely focused on their prospects' priorities. I'm not talking about understanding pain points. I'm not talking about understanding like to have and need to have. I want to understand your prospects' priorities. And we're going to dig into what a priority is and how you get to it. because I want you to understand who in the world you're trying to communicate with. And I want you to visualize that you're in front of that finalist pitch and you're on a Zoom meeting and there are 7 or 8 of them sitting around with their little tiny videos looking at you but doing something else, right? Because everybody's really good at that now, and keeping the brain's attention is going to be very, very difficult. But I will share this with you, that people that space out and don't pay attention to you do not buy. So your number one objective is to understand who in the world you're trying to communicate with. You're trying to communicate with a 3-pound organ called the brain. That's a mighty powerful organ, right? But it's a very primitive and predictable decision maker. It makes decisions the same way every single time. And it takes so much energy to keep the brain awake and engaged that there's a certain approach you must take if you want to keep your prospect engaged. To speak simply, we could spend a whole, 45 minutes on just the brain and how it makes decisions, but we're going to keep this at the right level today. There are 2 brains, the primitive brain and the rational brain. The primitive brain, you've also heard the limbic brain, the reptilian brain, the middle brain, but this part of the brain here is where 90% of all decision making happens. We also have the rational brain. The rational brain is focused on logic, right? Data, information, requires critical thinking. It takes so much energy to engage the rational brain that we never want to use it. What is it, Mike? What percent of decision making happens in the primitive brain? Like 90%. 90% of all decisions happen at the primitive brain level. Sorry, Mike.
Sorry, I was muted. My answer was going to be almost all of it.
Yeah, there you go. Almost all, that would work too, right? And guess what? The primitive brain, Mike, does not read. So when we hand over a 3,800-page RFP response, right, do you expect your prospects to really read that or even want to read it? I know you got to do it, but what are we here to do? Submit RFPs or win opportunities. So I want you to understand how the brain makes a decision so we can adapt to it, adopt the approach. 90% of all decisions happen there. Doesn't know how to read. The primitive brain is insanely focused on eliminating pains, threats, and fears with an emphasis on anyone? Anyone's Mike and Sarah in this case. Threats always get acted on. So earlier I go, I don't want you tuned in to your prospect's pain points. I want you tuned into their direct threats because that's what actually drives priority. The problem is, and the disconnect is most people try to sell rationally and logically, but the brain buys at a primitive brain level. And this is also where priority is established. This is where priority happens. So the question is, heck, what is a priority? In a priority, per our definition, a priority is a commitment to solve a threat. Threats always get acted on. We live with pain. We all have fears, but threats always get acted on. Threats become priorities. It all happens at the primitive brain level. So how do you find it? We've got to understand what really drives our real prospects to make a decision, because people don't do what they wish, want, and need to do. They just don't. There's all kinds of things we should be doing, need to do, ought to do. But what our brains do is we spend a disproportionate amount of time focused on making pains, threats, and fears go away with an emphasis on threats. So if you're going to change your business approach to be done in a way that speaks to your prospects' priorities, we need to understand that highest level decision maker that you desperately want to get to. What are his or her threats when it comes to a project like this? And more importantly, what can you do about it? Because the next thing winning teams are doing is they're developing out what's called their priority position. I want you to write that down. Priority position. Because we don't have time or energy to talk about brand. Because brand is so confusing and no one knows, is it a logo? Is it a tagline? Is it a slogan? Is it a new website? But we want to think in terms of priority position. I'm going to build on each of these 6 things we're sharing. So if we understand that the primitive brain is where priority is established, it makes sense to develop out what's called a priority position. And a priority position really roots in 2 simple questions. Mike, what are the 2 most Simple questions that all your prospect wants to need when you jump on a Zoom or when you go into a meeting. What are those 2 simple questions?
Why should I buy from you? And why should I prioritize it over everything else I have to do now?
Absolutely. Those are 2, thank you, Mike. Those are 2 of the simplest questions. Why in the world should I pick you? And why should I prioritize this above all the other things I'm dealing with right now? And when you hear what your firm might be saying, you're going to say, well, it's our experience, it's our people. And I will say this, Mike and Sarah and the rest of the crew here, I've never heard anyone say, well, when it comes to our people, I'd say mediocre at best. And if you're looking at our process, I wouldn't, right? No one says that. So what does the primitive brain do? It gets confused because you all sound, look, and act like each other. And when the brain gets confused, it only does one of 2 things. Either shuts down or commoditizes you. So understanding your prospect's real priorities are important. And your priority position, I hope you have this written down, all starts with something simple like why you and why now. But when you're able to answer this in a way that fits your prospect's priorities, not pain points. Sorry, I won't slap the table. Sarah corrected me. I slapped the table. Sorry. I'll hold my hands behind my back. What it does, it helps separate you from your competitors. And more importantly, it puts your as a priority above other options. And when you are a priority, it actually creates influence. When you're talking to your prospects' real priorities, you become very influential. And influence actually writes RFPs. And winning firms are doing this all day, every day, all the time. And if you're going to continue to make a living, which I'm not saying you are, but if your organization is going to keep responding to RFPs who have been influenced by someone else, your world's only going to get really hard really quick because this race to the bottom is accelerating because there are too many firms chasing too few deals. So when you think about your priority position, it's really as simple as your ability to position yourself in alignment with your prospect's priorities. And where is priority established? Mike or Sarah?
Primitive brain.
At the primitive brain. So we're going to keep building on these things that organizations are doing. You've got to understand the priority. Got to understand your sign of the primitive brain. You've got to align yourself with your prospect's priority. So really your priority position now becomes your real impact connected to your prospect's top priorities. So now we're introducing a whole new set of tools, and we're going to really emphasize the right things. So people don't want to hear what you do. They want to know the real impact of what you do in a way that might fit a priority that I have, which means a threat that I'm living with. You're going to develop on an elevator pitch, and we call it the priority pitch, that every single person in your firm needs to clearly understand. You're going to have what's called convincing advantage, how you're going to prove your real impact over and over again. Invaluable insights are going to show up here in a few minutes on how you're going to get influential reach with something inside an organization well in advance of the RFP. So the reality is, when you want to get to the real decision makers, I'm not saying win over the buying committee. I'm talking about reaching the real decision maker, the business owner, the president of the university, the people that are really in front of this, not on the buying committee, the ones that are really in front of this. We have to be in a spot where your priority position has them wanting to fight for you. This is who I want to work with. And if you're going to wait to be tucked in with everybody else, where there's 3 or 4 people that can do the same work you can, you're going to lose your margins. So they have to want to fight for you. But the question is, are you worth fighting for? That's probably another one worth writing down. Are we worth fighting for? If this is about priority and knowing your priority position, the question is, are you worth fighting for? Now, if I asked you, I'm going to share this some insight. This actually, Heather, kind of opens up this, we're going to talk about toward the end here. But when you think of what is your current priority position, I want you to really think about this because it's going to be so important moving forward. There's really one best way to find out. And that is to maybe walk the halls and ask for your elevator pitch. And I'm talking every single person in your organization should be able to answer that simple question, Why in the world should someone choose us? But it's got to be done in a way that fits a priority that your prospect has if you ever want to have an early meeting with somebody. Because that's one of the biggest things we hear from people. I can't meet with people like I used to. I can't get to them earlier enough in the process. You can if you're saying the right things that matter to them. But if you don't, they'll say, okay, Mike, so you do some really bang up engineering. That's great stuff. I'll let you know when the RFP comes out. Mike should have been delivering some really key. I'm sorry, Mike.
I'll put you in the pile.
Yeah, put you in the pile. Versus I should be saying, Mike, you want to expand this or you want to grow over here. These are the 3 issues you'll probably be dealing with. We got to figure out on the front side versus waiting until the very end. That's going to increase the odds of getting a meeting much more so than saying we can service your engineering needs like nobody's business. I don't think anyone says that, but you know what I mean. So why does this matter? Because this matters because we need to get in earlier. And when you think about the decision organizations go through, there's really 3 phases. Number 1 is what we call prioritize. That's where they determine, do we even need another building or not? Do we want to grow this or not? Do we want to refurbish? What is it we want to do? Then they go into the planning phase. How much money do you think we're going to need? What kind of resources? How are we going to make this work? Who's going to be on our team? And what do we really expect from someone to do this work for us? And then we go to procurement. We know we're the place we don't want to be. I'll show you in a second if you don't. But the fact is the 3 deadly C's are doing this. Knowing that 70% of the buying journey is done before they even bring you in. Guess where you are now? On top of that, the decision-making team is now 7 or 8 people, right? And you have 7 or 8 people that don't even understand why you're any different than anybody else. And then what happens? They drive you right down to the bottom. This is the race to the bottom. In fact, this is where they want you, but guess where you need to be? You need to be meeting with those highest level decision makers early, but you have to have something that's worth their time or they won't meet with you. That's why you're struggling. When sales leaders come to us all the time, our people can't get meetings with people. They're trying. It's like, you know why they can't get meetings with people? Because they're not saying anything that's worth their time. Because we have very little time in our lives and our brains are only going to allow in certain people. And I'll tell you, think about your own world. You're only going to let people in who could actually help eliminate a pain, threat, or fear, whether you realize that pain, threat, or fear or not.
Brian, that left-hand side is where all your market share growth is, all your margin growth, and all of your new revenue growth.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
At this point, you will not get any of those 3 over in that procurement stage.
Nope. It's nothing but the race to the bottom that's going to get worse. In fact, if we want to peer into the future another 5 years or so, if you're waiting for procurement, artificial intelligence is going to take over anyway. Because by the time someone's prioritized something, by the time they've planned it, when they're just going to go out for bid, they're going to be able to pull, and their firm's offering this service right now, by the way, saying, look, we'll just use AI. We'll select the right firm for you based on all your requirements. Talk about being taken out of the game. In fact, one of those firms was advertising that we'll reduce your cost by 15 to 20%. Guess what that is? That's really someone's margin. So they're gonna suck the life out of this industry if you do not have the ability to get in earlier.
Well, and Brian, that's where, as marketers, the messaging changes, right? With those insights and meeting those priorities, because your prospects are out there. At that point, they're Googling and they're looking for what do we need to be thinking about? What should we be doing? And when you can introduce those insights, which I know you're going to get into here now, to meet those priorities, to address threats that maybe they don't even know they have.
Absolutely.
They're not even thinking about. So
absolutely. And even at a higher level, I think you should be talking to university presidents about the challenges they have with the variety of facilities they have. Just as a simple example, you should be talking to the business owners. And if you're an architect, let's not talk about I can do great buildings, but let's talk what it takes to attract great talent in today's world. That will get her attention if you talk about the threats they have. And believe it or not, the work that you do impacts that. But I don't believe most of you are talking that way. We're showing up with pretty pictures and all these testimonials, but everybody has pretty pictures and testimonials. And I want you to be worth fighting for. So another thing that organizations are doing, so not only they understand the priority and they develop their priority position, they're getting better meetings earlier, right? Here's the RFP. But guess what? We want to be positioned earlier. And if we're going to be positioned earlier, we have to have something that's worth them saying, I want to talk to you about that. You mean you have unique ways to help me attract great talent? That's worthy of a conversation. But if we're just going to sell the fact that we can design a great looking headquarters, they'll wait. So we need to position ourselves earlier than we're doing right now. And what happens is when we do position ourselves earlier, we do create more influence. What writes RFPs? Influence. So you get so much influence that you get in front of the real decision maker. I know that some of you are interconnected to other firms. So if you're an engineering organization, you might have to work through an architect. Why don't you go in front of architects saying, look, I can help you land more business. I can help you win more opportunities through this approach we take. In fact, we have a client in Chicago. They do interior only construction. And they're always brought at the last minute. We help them create their real priority position with the right insights. And now architects are bringing the construction partner on projects because they're bringing something of value for them. So find that champion. And when you have that champion, she creates believers. And then believers have supporters. So you have influence throughout the entire process. Versus if you wait to the very end, you're just one of many. And you can't stay relevant when you're one of many. Competitive teams today are also closing big deals on screen. Sure, we want to go back to the way things used to be. I just don't think it's going to happen for a while, if ever. So we now have to look at today's boardroom. It's way different than what it used to be. By the way, Mike, we've heard this, and so we've heard this a lot, haven't we? Oh, just get me in front of the prospects. I can close them once we're in there. And I could talk to 3 of the finalists. They'll all say that. Just get me in front of the prospect. We'll win that. And then they don't win it. Then they'll make some kind of, well, it's political. Well, it's this. In sports, they call it that loser's limp. I lost, but I'm going to blame everything else versus I just didn't know how to win the priority. So this new boardroom, this is not something that gets accomplished in a workshop. Sarah, you going to say something?
I was just going to say, even if we do go back to an in-person final pitch, you're going to have to get through a lot of this little screens first. I just don't see it.
Absolutely.
This is going to be what your biz dev team is going to have to get through before they get to that in-person meeting, if that even happens.
Yep, absolutely. And this is not a workshop. This is not where to turn the lights on and create a green screen, all that. And if you weren't good at presenting, you're in trouble now. The charisma is not going to get you through this. Right? You've got to be great out of the gate. In fact, knowing that your number one objective is to keep that primitive brain awake, you've got to capture their attention in the first 45 seconds. They're making up their mind. They might stay on the meeting, but they aren't listening to you anymore. So not only do you have to capture their attention in the first 45 seconds, you've got to win this opportunity in the first 9 minutes, which I think you can. And I think winning teams are able to do that. Not walking through all the details, but I want every single person going, that's the group we want to work with. And that can be done in the first 9 minutes. You have to capture their attention at the primitive brain level in the first 45 seconds. But what's the problem? How do most people spend the first 45 seconds to 5 minutes, Mike?
Talking about myself.
Yeah. And who cares? Does the primitive brain care about you? Nope. All it cares about is eliminating my pains, threats, and fears. And you bring up a threat, you've got all my attention. Which is why an elevator pitch is so important. Because in your elevator pitch, you introduce a pain that goes to a threat, and then you talk about how you're going to make that go away. And if someone's interested, I'll make the group ask for it. I'll be happy to share our elevator pitch, which I've shared probably most of it in bits and pieces, but I'm happy to at some point, just to give you some kind of a model. And we have more distractions than ever before. So keeping the brain, you've got a couple objectives. When you get on that finalist meeting with 7 people, your number one objective, believe it or not, is to keep the brain awake. No one's ever said, I didn't listen to a word Mike said. I spaced out the whole time, but we should buy from him and buy from him now. Right? So your number one objective is to keep the brain awake. Your second objective is to lower the barrier between you and the people in that audience because they don't trust you when you start. It's okay. Get over it because we are skeptical of people. So you've got to lower that trust. And actually, your elevator pitch or your priority pitch is the first best way to build trust with people. In fact, Sinek talks about this in his book, Start With Why. People don't buy what you do. They don't even buy how, they buy the why. And when people believe the same things, what happens? When people believe the same things, what do we develop, Sarah? We believe each other, so we develop Trust.
Trust. Yeah.
We deliver trust. And it's about developing trust, not just relationships. Now, Mike and Sarah, this is going to be a tough one here, right? Because this is hardcore. This is hardcore, but so pure. Because I would start with this. I have yet to hear of a professional athlete or collegiate athlete that would say, you want me to look at game film? You want me to look at my performance and see if I can get better? I don't think so. No one would ever say, would everyone ever say that? They might think that, but they wouldn't say it, right? Why aren't we applying this to our profession? Because you couldn't until now. And you have to start by thinking that we don't have meetings anymore. We have moments of truth because our time has been compressed. An hour meeting is now 30 minutes. 30-minute meeting is now 15 minutes. You got 45 seconds to connect and develop trust. So this is a moment of truth. You either move forward or you're discounted right away. That's just the reality of the world we live in. And what we now have are actual game film. We can actually look at our performance and drive better improvement. So much so, because we're actually doing most of our meetings over Zoom, we can not only do a video replay of our session, but we can identify how many questions did we ask? How much of the talking did we do? What key words were we using? What was our average pace of speaking? What was the average, the type of words we're using? Were they primitive brain friendly or were they just rational brain nonsense? Now, this scares a lot of people because it's hard to look at yourself, but all growth begins with telling the truth, doesn't it? And this is not about you not doing it, but what if? I want you, each of you to think right now, what if your toughest competitor started doing this today? And every single day, they break down every engagement that they have, and they get better and better and better every day. That's just something that you have to think about moving forward. And the sixth one we're going to talk about here today is that winning teams are able and willing to adapt to the world that we live in. And this starts when we start, Sarah, you mentioned this earlier about how do we start getting better meetings with people? And this is a simple concept of existing demand versus emerging demand. And we have to think in a world where we have to go hunt what is rightfully ours. There's not enough coming our way, and the work that does come your way is going to be commoditized. So we have to start thinking like the mountain lion, not the little birdies in the nest waiting for the worms to come. So let's think about what existing demand is. They already know what they want to do. They have a solution in mind, and they'll call you when they're ready. This is, in essence, an RFP. Here's what we want. Here's what we want to do. Here's the parameters. And you get the three ugly questions when you're responding to an RFP. The three uglies are this. Do you want it? Can you do it? And how much? That's the world of established demand. As communicators and marketers, I really want you to start focusing on emerging demand. And emerging demand is much, much different. We have to start using insights. We're going to change the way they think about a purchase path. They may not even have thought about building that new building yet or doing the things they're doing. But they'll lean in when they're challenged because I want you communicating with business leaders who appreciate being challenged, who respect you for challenging them. And you build demand through those insights, because when you have those insights, you now have influence earlier with higher level decision makers. It's not hard to break down the challenges we see in any industry, let alone the AEC industry. Well, we live in this world, we do it every day. So it's clear as could be that you're not saying things that any high level decision maker would want to have a conversation with you about. So you stay stuck waiting for the RFP to come out. And that used to get you by. But remember this accelerating age I was talking about. So I like to keep things super simple. So I always like to think, hey, there's only 3 decisions you have to make. And again, I would recommend you sharing this with your principals, and we'd be happy to actually do a repeat performance, because I really believe that at the tip top, they've got to believe this. They've got to understand this, and they've got to see what they're dealing with. But there's really only 3 decisions you have to make. And the first decision is simple. Do you want to compete? Because I shared with you, or we all shared with you, 6 things that winning teams are doing right now. And if you say, yeah, those are all really good, we should think about doing one of those, I would question your willingness to compete, because other companies are doing this right now. And there are too many firms chasing too few opportunities. So the question is, do we want to compete? Some people don't. They say they do, but they don't. But we want to find people who really, really want to compete. The next decision you have to say, are we willing to commit to creating our priority position? Because no one agrees with me, I don't think, that if you had 46 people in your firm and all 46 people gave different reasons why someone should choose you, that that's a healthy thing. I don't think you would agree with me. We have to be aligned with our real impact that connects to our prospects' priority if you want to stay relevant and vital moving forward. You got away with it before, but no longer, because we now live in the year 2025. Third decision you have to make is how much of a head start do you want to surrender to your competitors, right? Again, you could say, oh, that's all good stuff. We're not going to do it. That's fine. But what are you going to do when your competition starts doing every single one of these things? And I do not want to hear from a principal or a leader of an organization saying, we need to find a way to get in earlier and write these RFPs. We just showed you exactly what you need to do. But if you don't go about it, I just don't know if you're willing to do it. But the question is, how much time are we going to surrender to our competition who's like, you know what? This is exactly what we're going to do. And the guy that this is the guy, Northcote. How about that name? Northcote Parkinson is the guy that came up with the quote that work fits the time allotted. I think this one's way better. That delay is the deadliest form of denial. You could say all this stuff's great. We're going to do it in 3 months or 6 months. Like, how delusional are you? I'm sorry, I'm coming strong on this. Only because it's rooted in a very firm belief that we can change and there are opportunities. And either the future, we create the future, or we let it happen to us. And I just don't want you to let things happen to you. So, what did we learn? We learned a few things, didn't we? We learned that we're trying to connect to the primitive part of the brain. We've got to be insanely focused on connecting to our prospects' top priorities. Not only that, we have to be committed to developing out your priority position. We have to get better meetings earlier. Got to be able to close big deals on screen, right? We have to be using game film. That's a tough one. But the reality is, what if your competition did every single day, every single call, they got better and better and better and better? Even if they only got 2% better on every call. After 10 calls, they're 20% better than you, right? After 50 calls, they're like 100% better. And then finally, they're able to adapt to the world that we live in. So I really appreciate your time. Hopefully, if there's some questions, we can address them. But Mike, one of the things that Mike asked to create a few months ago, or got a couple months ago, about how can we help these firms not go desk to desk to desk saying, hey, why would you choose us? Why would you choose us now? We've actually put together a really cool offering that I'd like him to introduce. So Mike, I'm going to surrender the share. And if you want to take it over, that would be
Brian,
fantastic.
Before Mike gets started, you threw it out there that you would do the RPG elevator pitch. And
I did
in the chat. Yes, you did. But the people would like to hear it.
Oh my gosh, you're making me blush. Well, first of all, Sarah, we believe the biggest current threat you face is becoming a commodity in your prospect's eyes. And what's making it worse, decision-making teams keep getting bigger, and they're ignoring your salespeople to the very end of the buying journey. It's driving this race to the bottom, all happening through our 3 deadly C's: commoditization, consensus decision-making, compressed selling time. And what we believe is that organizations are unprepared and ill-equipped to sell how today's buying teams buy. And in this world of such rapid change, the Revenue Path Group is the only organization designed to help you combat these 3 deadly C's in a way where we can help you win the brain, to win the journey, to win the deal. That's ours. Now, the reason I share this is we help people develop them, those kind of things. But what's interesting is when you nail it, and we're only trying to work with certain CEOs who don't want to be, relevant. They want to be relevant. And what'll happen is when you're going through your elevator pitch in that way, I've had CEOs say, Brian, I'm going to stop you right there. We are becoming commoditized. We are doing this. We are doing that. And these are top leaders of organizations because your real impact has to be connected to their priorities. So it's really important to make sure that your priority pitch or elevator pitch really fits those threats they're feeling. It has nothing to do with the exact work we do. We get to that later because the primitive brain doesn't care about what you do. They just want to know, why should I talk to you? And if you're concerned with commoditization, if you're concerned with decision-making teams, if you're concerned with the fact that I can't get meetings anymore like I used to, you're going to want to find out how I can make that go away. And what we can do, that comes later.
Yeah. Nowhere do you say we're a agency or a consulting firm.
And here's the thing, they'll say, hey, Brian, what do you do? Don't tell people what you do because no one wants that. They want the real impact of what you do.
Yeah. All right, well, so that Mike can
Boom.
go.
There you go. Thank you.
About 10 minutes left.
All right, guys, I'm going to move quickly. First, I want to do a mic check. Everybody hear me okay? And are you guys seeing your my screen?
Yes and yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to go quickly so we have some time to answer a few questions. But earlier, Brian mentioned that we've come up with a program that helps us be able to give a first toe into the water into game film and makes this idea of finding out where your team is really at on their elevator pitch or priority pitch and what people are out there saying when they're presenting you. So again, we talked about the importance of that in 2020, and it's always been important, but now more than ever with limited opportunities to talk to people who are overbooked and overstressed and just don't have time to talk about anything that doesn't solve a problem for them. So what is your team saying when they're presented with one of these moments of truth? We need to give you the ability to measure your team's ability to get in earlier with higher level decision makers. That's why we built the Priority Pitch Challenge. Now, I'm not going to get too far into the details, but here's the basics. We'll work together to determine some of the priorities and key phrases that you want to hear in your company's pitch. We'll send out invites to everybody that you want to participate, and they'll be asked to log into a system where we explain what we're doing and how to do it. We'll present them with the moment of truth, and when they say go, their camera turns on and we record it. Once submitted, each of the pitch comes back to us and we do our analyzation on it. We then provide it back to you as a group, and we'll meet and discuss our findings, and we'll talk about some recommended next steps. So what do you really get? We're going to give you we present this as a PowerPoint deck with embedded videos in it. So you'll get a video for the recording of every one of your participants, and it'll all be in one easy to share and one easy to view space. And then you get individualized pitch reporting. So what's that look like? Well, with each one, we're going to be looking at things like how much time it took to present, what the grade level of the content that was presented is.
Which, is high grade level better or is lower grade level better?
Well, the lower the better. And what we target is usually around 8th grade reading level for most of our professional conversations.
Because the primitive brain has a hard time with words, and complex words just confuse the brain.
Right, and it shuts us down. So we have ways of looking at that and scaling that. We then will look at our keywords that we came up together with and hit some of those priority words that we know need to be in any good sales conversation. From there, our analyst will give an overall performance score. And based on that overall performance score, you see up in the left-hand corner here that there's a team rank. So when we give you that deck back, everybody will be presented in order of rank of quality of pitch according to us, and you'll be able to view all those things. So I believe what we're doing this time is anybody who participated in the chat, anybody who asked a question is eligible for our free giveaway. The giveaway is this full service for up to 15 of your team members. But I also want to put out that this is also a service that we combine with some other tools as a great way to get started with us. So everyone is eligible for this, but we are giving away one free team access for your group today.
Awesome. I think we can include the registration too. If that's okay, Heather, to allow people to register for this as well. But we do have some questions coming in. Are you guys ready?
I hope.
Okay. Well, Erica asked,
sorry.
what was the software to analyze the film? And I think we just answered that, Erica, but if not, let me know. And so here's a question from a different Erica. My firm has separate marketing and sales folks within the business development team. Are there any tips for how those who don't end up face-to-face can support those who are the normal boots on the ground?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to address this. I think that first of all, I would like your marketing team to be viewed as a group that can help them get better meetings earlier. And I also think it's going to be up to you to help guide them on how to do better as boots on the ground. Because I think a lot of times in organizations, not just AEC, but marketing tends to put the business development people in harm's way because they say things wrong. They see things like everybody else. And all of a sudden your BD is out there going, man, they think we're all the same. So I think that what we can do to work together is to really understand, get and develop that priority position. And you could say, look, we understand our real impact and how it connects to our ideal prospects' priorities. And what we're going to do for you, boots on the ground, is we're going to come up with great insights that you can go take to your prospects to challenge them in a way that drives great engagement. They will more than appreciate the effort you're putting forth. And this is almost a 180 from a established demand perspective where you're just giving their slides so they can go pitch them. How about we put slides together that are designed to win the room? How about we help them with slides going, this is how you win. We don't talk about ourselves for the first 5 minutes. We're going to flip this completely around. And this is why I think marketing can be very much leaders in this space and not just tell me what you need. Or I hear this a lot too. We put them in the right order. They just reshuffled them and did it completely wrong again. And that's an example of the company not being aligned around your real impact or understanding this very presentation. So I think that's why the recording to me is important to share with others so that they understand where you're coming from, because I don't think anyone would argue that this is simple stuff, but getting other people to change behaviors, that's the biggest issue, is changing behaviors. And all I can do, or we can do, is paint the reality that if we don't change behaviors, game's over in a relatively short period of time. So alignment's super, super important. Can I sorry, I got the chat up as well. So Tony,
okay,
we have a couple clients now where the project managers are awesome people, but they're really not salespeople or business development, and they think they have to become salespeople, or they think the prospect's brain needs to understand all this technicality, but the primitive brain doesn't. In fact, the primitive brain gets confused, and do not let them tell you otherwise. So it might be beneficial for your project managers to walk through a webinar like this or a session like this that we could do for your organization, but get them to understand, okay, we all now understand we're trying to reach the primitive brain. I can't go technical. I can't talk about the wrong things because it doesn't matter anymore. Because you're set, and I think people that aren't marketers or business developers first think about their career. I'm an engineer. I'm an architect. I'm a project manager. I'm not a salesperson. Well, if you're ever competing for something where there's a winner and a loser, a winner and a non-winner, we can call it what we want, but we don't want to lose opportunities. So it takes a little longer for project managers and engineers and architects, but the winning firms that are growing today are getting over this and are doing something about it.
A really easy way to address that, by the way, is, and look, I'm a technical person too. I spend a lot of years talking about the work that I do because that's how I get value, right? But what I learned that is more important than the work that I do and how I do it specifically is why I do it and what the customer is going to benefit from my work. So that's a really easy way to change their mindset. Why are you doing this, and why should the customer care about it? It will really kind of flip their brain.
Now, hey, by the way, we're at the 1 o'clock mark. I'm okay if Sarah, if you and Mike are to take a few more questions, but if people have to go, I really appreciate your time today. I really hope that this was worth your time and they can actually help you bring the right kind of change to your organization and lead as we move forward. So any other questions you want to throw in the chat box? If not, Bridget and Heather, I'll turn it back over to you.
So Heather did have a question. She's trying to drive the race to the bottom by asking how much the elevator pitch service is. So
you know,
she's
Heather,
just
what I
getting it
will
right back to us.
What would be so like, well, it depends, Heather. I think what we really should do, because we don't know how much work is to be done, and there's just a couple of variables you need to think about. But what place we'd like to always start is, what are we saying right now? And then we can kind of deconstruct and figure out how the right way to get there, because I don't know how close your firm is right now to saying the right things to the right people. And so I just, the numbers are tough now because we just don't know the kind of work at hand. But here's all I can say is when you do get in a spot where you align your people and you nail it, you start winning the projects you really, really want. And those are usually the ones with the highest margin. So I can't get too detailed now just because there's a few variables. I can be concrete in the fact that you will win those opportunities that you want to win. If you want to talk to some other groups where we've done this for, or to, help them through and how they win the right opportunities, I'd be happy to introduce you to some people.
And we'd be happy to have a deeper conversation,
Yeah,
understand
absolutely.
what your space looks like and how we can help.
So I dropped the registration form for the winning the priority pitch challenge in the chat, and then I also, if you just scroll up on that page, you'll get to the same spot as the other link I dropped in with the free ebook download, and you can hit Brian up and ask him any other questions as well from there. So
just this is Heather again. I'm going to start my video. First of all, thank you so much to Brian, Mike, and Sarah. Welcome back, Bridget, as well. So I know at the beginning I had said that we'll use the chat log to pick the winner, but I think Sarah had put in that link, and it's kind of a nicer service or way for them to track and pick the winner. So if you are interested in winning that elevator pitch session from them, do use that link that Sarah has posted in the chat. Go ahead and register that way, and then RPG will take care of selecting the winner from that and then notifying that person. So SMPS will not be doing that ourselves. The RPG will be doing that directly. So I think all the questions were answered. So any final comments from you, Sarah, Brian, or Mike at all?
thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you so much for presenting to us. The entire time I'm like, oh, I want so-and-so to hear that. I want so-and-so to hear that.
I know.
So I feel like I was like feverishly taking notes, and I just need to share this with everybody at work. So
yeah, and I know recorded sessions are hard to be able to commit to, but I do know that others need to buy in. But trust me, once it's just important. It's really important that they grasp onto this.
Yeah, no, I'm going to make them sit down and watch it. I'm going to be like, this is required. So, all right. So thank you so much. Someone's asking if we'll send a link to the presentation. We will do that. SMPS will share it with you if you guys, Sarah, Brian, and Mike, if you're okay with it. Usually it's okay. Then we'll go ahead and share a link that will be up for a certain amount of time, and we'll clarify that. And then, so feel free to download it and then save it for yourselves and send it to on. So there's a bunch of thank yous coming in through the chat. So I just wanted to say thank you again to everybody.
Yeah, that's my pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Bridget, did you have any final comments?
Thank you guys so much for kicking off our first program of the season. It was great. Great insight for us to take.
Thanks, Bridget. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Have a great rest of your day.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
See you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Heather.